Hey guys, Michael Hyatt here. Welcome to the Michael Hyatt Show. I am so excited that you've joined us. We have special guest Lolly Daskal. Later, we're going to be talking about her new book, The Leadership Gap. You guys are going to love this. If you have any interest in leadership or how your strengths can sometimes become a weakness and can actually hinder your leadership, we're going to talk about all of that and more. So this is the pre-show. This is just a chance for us to kind of get tuned up, get everything really working right, and kind of to banter back and forth with you a little bit and just find out what's happening in your life. And I am so glad you're here, but I want to encourage you to get your friends here too. So please click the share button now to invite them to join. So whether you're on Periscope or YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're watching from, just share this out with your friends in your social media channels. Would you do that for me? I'd be so grateful. So the first question I want to ask you guys is, where are you watching from? And I happen to be, I'll go first, I happen to be in Nashville, Tennessee tonight, where it's like 70, 72 degrees. We had this big heat front this last week. In fact, I was in New York, where Lolly's calling in from tonight. But I was in New York last week, Thursday and Friday. I could not believe how hot it was. I had to get back to the south so I could get to cool weather. But it was about 70, 72 degrees here. Absolutely gorgeous. My favorite temperature, my favorite time of year. Actually, I love the springtime, except for the pollen count. It's been a little bit crazy. So I'm going to go over to the comment cam with my other computers and just see if we've got some comments, because I'd love to hear where you guys are calling in from. So let me switch over to this. Okay, on Facebook, Lynn from Tampa, Florida. Kent says, cannot hear Facebook. I'm not sure what to tell you, Kent. Maybe one of our team can help you there, but sometimes that may be as simple as refreshing. Sometimes that may be as simple as double checking your audio settings and making sure you're hooked up. So then Nancy, I just saw her a second ago. I can't remember where she was calling from. Jessica from Margate, Florida. Jeff from Estes Park, Colorado. Love Estes Park. I'm going to try to do something here so I can see if I can. Jeff from Estes Park. I got to turn down my volume. This is why we have the pre-show, so we can get all this good stuff figured out. All righty. And then on YouTube, Mark from, he says hi. I thought that was Hawaii, but it's hi. And then he's from Lompoc, California. Karen from Madeline, Colombia. Fantastic. All righty. Kenyetta from Cape Cod. Michael from Atlanta. Ida from Atlanta. Another Ida from Bethlehem. Wow. Fantastic, guys. Okay, I'm going to go back and get another question because I got another one that I want to ask you that's apropos to our topic tonight. So this one is this. Have you ever noticed that a leader's greatest strengths can also be their greatest weaknesses? And I'll give you an example. I had a boss that I worked for one time that was like the most amazing, energetic, charismatic, winsome guy, had all this charisma, but the problem was that it didn't serve him well when he really had to get down to executing on the plan. He just thought if he could show up and do his charisma thing, it was enough. I don't know if you guys have ever read that quote from Jim Collins. I think he says it in Good to Great, but I'm not sure. But he makes this point. He says, it's possible to succeed with charisma, but it's more difficult. And I think it's really true because a lot of times people rely on charisma instead of, being able to execute on some of the fundamentals. But for you guys, have you ever noticed that a leader's strengths can also be their greatest weakness? And I'm going to go back to the comments here and just see what you guys are coming up with here. All righty, I'm looking at Periscope. Pete, I see you joined. Fantastic. Love it if you guys could share it here on Periscope too. Crystal said yes. Can you guys give me some examples of when a leader's strengths became their weaknesses? Gerhard says, he has green eyes, not blue, as I wrote before. Sorry. I'm assuming you mean me. Yes, my eyes are green. Justin's checking in or watching from Bozeman. Yeah, Jessica says, yes, I've noticed that. Yes, I've noticed that strengths can sometimes be weaknesses. Vicky, good to see you. She says, really looking forward to this. Luria says, good point. Christine says, yes. Len says, yes, I believe that's true. Wendy says, yes, a heart for serving a team that invites members to take advantage. Boy, I've seen that too. Or how about this? A leader that really wants to be helpful, that in trying to build or to be helpful to his team, he creates a kind of dependency on him that they're either afraid or unwilling to act apart from him. And that can be a problem as well. Yeah, Vicky said, yes, I agree. My greatest strength is my greatest weakness. For example, I am very outgoing and love people, but often taken for over the top and unprofessional. I've learned to calm down a little bit. That is hilarious. Vicky, you are definitely not over the top. I love your enthusiasm. One of my favorite things about you. Nancy said, yes, especially if there are not those around to balance things out. Yeah, good point. Okay. So on YouTube, feed_sheep just joined. Salon Marie just joined. Gosh, fantastic. Tom said, strengths or weaknesses when utilized in the extremes. Jessica said, I could be a perfectionist. That's a mixed bag. Great attention to details, but not a good overall big picture. Man, that is definitely something that dogs me. I have really high standards. And sometimes that can be a problem. I mean, honestly, before I built out my team, it would keep me from shipping stuff out the door. You know, I just had a little bit more tweaking to do to get it just perfect before I would ship it. And my team is like, no, we have a launch date on this date, and you do your best till you get to that date, and then we're going with it. And so now what we do in my company at Michael Hyatt and Company is we launch and then we iterate. We don't wait to get it perfect. But like even this live show, I mean, I don't know if you guys were around for the very first episode when I attempted to interview Andy Andrews. It was an unmitigated disaster. It was epic. It was one for the books. But I milked that for so much juice. First of all, we learned so much from it. But then I was able to get a blog post out of it, bunch of stuff. You know, you learn more sometimes when you fail, and perfectionism often is the mother of procrastination. So I've learned to get better at it. I'm still a recovering perfectionist, but I'm getting better at it. Okay, here's another question. We got about 1 minute and 14 seconds. What strengths in your own leadership can also be liabilities if you aren't careful? Okay, and while you're thinking about that, let me just encourage you guys again to share this in your social media channels, whether that's Facebook or Periscope and YouTube. And by the way, all through the broadcast tonight, ask whatever question you want. Lolly and I are going to be taking questions, your leadership questions. And if you'll ask those just by posting in the comments section, we'll be taking those all through the broadcast. I'll periodically go to the comment cam and get those and make sure that we're getting your live questions answered with live answers. So back just for a moment. We've only got about 30 seconds here. Yeah, so on YouTube, Lauren says, many pastors are that way, charismatic but lack effectiveness. Yeah, I know more than one. Beautiful Horizon said, as a YouTuber, I have noticed that charisma only goes so far if you don't understand metadata and promotion. And Karen says, being so good at doing, they have trouble letting go of the reins for others to take over. Yep, absolutely. I'm just going to watch the clock, 6 seconds. I think that's all the time we're going to have for right now because we're about to begin the official start. So let me get to where I need to be here. All righty, guys. Well, we all know it's important to play to our strengths, but what if your strongest leadership abilities were getting in the way of achieving your ultimate goals? Well, according to my guest, executive leadership coach Lolly Daskal, that may exactly be the case. After decades of advising some of the most prominent executives in the world, Lolly has uncovered a startling pattern. Within each leader are powerful abilities that are also hidden impediments to greatness. And she's witnessed many highly driven leaders rise to promise, fueled by well-honed skill sets, only to falter when the shadow sides of those same skills emerge. Hello, I'm Michael Hyatt. Welcome to my live show where each week I talk with a different thought leader about some aspect of personal development, productivity, or leadership. My goal is to help you win at work, succeed at life, and lead with confidence. Let's get started. Lolly Daskal is one of the most sought-after executive leadership coaches in the world. She's the founder and the CEO of Lead From Within. I love that name because I really believe that self-leadership precedes team leadership, but with a proprietary leadership program based on a mix of modern philosophy, science, and nearly 30 years coaching top executives. Lolly's perspective on leadership continues to break new ground and produce exceptional results. And of her many awards and accolades, Lolly was designated a top 50 leadership and management expert by Inc. magazine. Her writing has appeared in the Harvard Business Review, Inc. magazine, Fast Company, Huffington Post, and Psychology Today, among others. But her proprietary insights are the subject of her new book, which comes out next week. It's called The Leadership Gap: What Gets Between You and Your Greatness. I love that title. But I've invited her here today to share with us some of the powerful insights that come from the book. Lolly, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here. It's a true honor.
I'm excited. So you're in New York tonight. What's the weather there?
It's a little gray, but now that I'm talking to you, it got much sunnier.
So did you get some rain over the weekend? I heard that was coming.
I was at my daughter's graduation, so I don't know what was happening in New York.
Okay. Well, maybe you missed the cool weather. I don't know. Well, let's dive right in. I know we're going to get a ton of questions here, and I just want to encourage you guys, as you're watching us do this interview, if you've got any questions about leadership or the gaps we're talking about, please go ahead and enter those into the comments, whether you're on Periscope, YouTube, or Facebook. I'm going to be checking all three streams because I really want you to get your questions answered live from Lolly. This is a great privilege. It's an honor to have her on the show, and I want to make sure you get your questions answered. So, Lolly, can you explain to us the concept of the leadership gap?
Absolutely. Within us, we have strengths, and most people, they concentrate on talking about those strengths. But we have a polarity of character within us, and sometimes they end up costing us in our greatness, and they are called the leadership gaps. They come from our weaknesses. They come from when we're stressed out. It's a part of within us that sometimes we don't pay attention to, and we don't even know it's ending up costing us and who we want to be, our truest potential.
Can you give us some examples, maybe out of your coaching practice, of leaders that you've worked with who had these enormous strengths that actually hindered their work because they were also weaknesses?
Absolutely. I'd love to tell you a story about Richard. And actually, he opens up the book, The Leadership Gap. And Richard was a very successful CEO. And he decided to retire and sell his company for a few $1 million. Actually, I think it was billions of dollars. And he went into retirement. But when he went into retirement, he found that he was bored and he didn't know what to do with himself. He didn't really like to play golf. And he said, you know what, I need to go find something to do. So he put out a bunch of feelers and calls, and he said, if anybody's looking for a board of directors, I would like to be on some boards. And before you knew it, everybody was calling Richard. Can you imagine a CEO of a very successful company, actually a former CEO, is now wanting to sit on a board? Everybody wanted him on the board. And after a bunch of calls, he decided to sit on one particular company's board. And Richard was known for being aggressive, being someone who knows what to do. And this board was having a very hard time with Richard and his character. So the CEO of the company called me in and said, you must come into our next board meeting. I want you to help us mediate because we have someone on this group that we don't know how to coach, we don't know how to talk to him, and we need your help. And I came to the meeting, and we all sat around this big table, and it took me 5 minutes to see what the problem was. The problem was Richard. Every time somebody spoke, Richard was, oh, I know what to do. So every time someone said, I have an idea, Richard was like, I have a better idea. And Richard was very used to, in his sweet spot, being the person of empower, right? The person in power, right? The person
Yep.
of leadership, the person who's like, do it my way. I know the best way. And what he wasn't noticing was that people around him were very uncomfortable. People around him didn't like the way he was leading. And we took a break. There was a 5-minute break. And I tried to go over to talk to Richard and say, Richard, do you mind if I give you some feedback? And he goes, well, I know. He didn't want to talk to me. He was like dismissing me. And as we know, the story ends up with a few months later, Richard was no more on the board. So the part about Richard, which was a powerful CEO, a successful CEO, that power, that influence, the person that knows a lot of information, was now alienating his board. And the people on the board didn't want to be around him. He was coming across as arrogant. He was coming across as a know-it-all and as a fixer. In my book, I call him the fixer. What I wanted to tell Richard, please become a navigator so you can be trusted for who you are. Instead, he was coming across as a fixer who was arrogant, and people did not want to be around him. So he was asked to leave.
Wow. Well, that rings really close to home because early in my career, I started getting promoted a lot, and I thought it was because I had a lot of answers. And so I would go into my team, and I would always speak first, because I saw what needed to be done. I was the fixer. I saw what needed to be done, and I just spoke to it. And I had my mentor pull me aside one day, actually my boss, and he said to me, it would really serve your team if you'd go last. Because once you declare yourself, everybody's just going to fall in line. Nobody's going to challenge you, and you're not going to get the best thinking of the group. And so what had been my strength, which was getting clarity quickly and all the rest, in that situation was a weakness. And just one quick other story. I remember coming home after I was the CEO of Thomas Nelson. I'd been there for about a year, and I've got a job where I'm having to make big, important decisions and all that. And I came home and I started ordering my daughters around and my wife, and my wife pulled me aside and she said, honey, you may be the CEO at work, but you're not the CEO at home. Chill out. And it was so helpful to get that perspective. So let me ask you one other thing. What is it that our areas of strength also tend to be blind spots where our weaknesses can hide? What's the dynamic of that? How does that work?
Right. So what we concentrate on, like you opened up the show in this great way of saying that this person was known for their charisma, right? And
Right.
so what we do is that we rely on that charisma, and we think we can bring that charisma to everything that we do. But what happens is that the charisma sometimes has a dark side. And in my book, I talk about there are 7 virtues of greatness, and then there are 7 virtues that lead you to your gaps. And just like charisma can be a gap sometimes, I talk about 7 in particular that I have found in the many years that I've been coaching around the world. The 7 virtues that I talk about, the 7 archetypes that I talk about, are universal. People have been talking to me about this is what they suffer with. You actually opened the show in this wonderful way tonight, and you said, I am a perfectionist. I like to do things in a high standard. Well, in my book, you would be called the inventor who has integrity. The inventor likes to do everything of quality, high standard, and excellence. But what happens is when an inventor sometimes gets in their own way, sometimes they cut corners, sometimes they do things that are not what it needs to be, it can end up costing them in their business. And you said something really wonderful. You said, I'm a perfectionist. And what I teach my clients is if you're a perfectionist, go for excellence instead of perfect, and you'll win every time.
That's a really good distinction. I like that. Could you go through the 7 archetypes for us? Just give us kind of a high-level flyover so that we've got a frame of reference.
Absolutely. And the first thing I want everybody to listen to, it's a very easy system, and it's a rethink system. It's an acronym for rethink. And why did I call it rethink many years ago? Is because people do a lot of thinking. They think and they think and they think, and I want leaders to rethink. Rethink what you know and maybe rethink what you don't know. Because most leaders think they have to have all the answers. Wouldn't it be great if a leader said, I don't know? And that's where the rethink comes in. The rethink is, I don't know who I need to be. So let me learn these 7 archetypes, and then I can choose who I want to be. So the first archetype in the rethink model is the rebel who is confident. Then we have the explorer. The explorer is about someone who needs to be very decisive about a decision, and they use their intuition. Then we have the truth teller. The truth teller is always about telling the truth. And then we have the hero, who's courageous when they are feeling fearful. And then we have the truth teller, the hero, the inventor, who's all about integrity. And then we have the navigator, who's a very smart person, who's very pragmatic, who's very practical. They have all the solutions. And because that's true, people trust them. And then we have the knight. The knight is not about gender, but it's about the characteristic of the knight. The knight is about loyalty, about protecting others, and it's about serving others. It's about being a servant leader. So those are the 7 attributes and values archetypes that will lead you to greatness. But within all of us, there is a gap, and we can talk about the gaps for each one of those archetypes.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I understand. With the archetypes, do we kind of naturally have one proclivity or another, but that we can also choose which of those we want to express given the context or the situation?
Michael, that's such a brilliant question. You know why? Because everybody's thinking that. So the answer to that is that these archetypes are based on virtues, and the virtues of confidence, honesty, trust, loyalty, respect. These are virtues we have within us. So we are all these archetypes, but they're situational. We have to ask ourselves in a given moment, which archetype do I need to be for this given moment so I can lead from my greatness and not my gaps?
So it's like we can put on that particular, I was going to say costume, but that's probably not the right phrase, but we can put on those attributes or the characteristics of that virtue and use those in that situation because it's going to be more effective than acting out of whatever one we would normally do. Is that right?
So let me just illustrate one of the gaps so it makes sense
Perfect.
of what I'm talking about. So let's take the first archetype. The first archetype, in order to be successful, it's the rebel. The rebel is someone who wants to make a significant difference in the world. They want to make an impact in the world. They want to do something that is out of the status quo. They just want to change things up. And the rebel, in order to do that, they have to be confident. But Michael, when I talk about confidence, I'm not talking about standing in front of a mirror and stating affirmations and just repeating mantras over and over again. My whole concept of confidence comes from the equation of your capabilities plus your competence equal confidence. That means from your skills and from your talents, that's what will give you confidence. Because what I have found to be true is that confidence is believing you're able, but competence is knowing you're able. And when you know you're able, that's when you take action. But for every single rebel that's out there that is confident, there is a leadership gap of the person who feels like an imposter who has self-doubt. How many times in our lives did we want to do something great? Did we want to make an impact in the world? But something inside us feels like an imposter, and we start to have self-doubt. And this leadership gap can cost us in being who we're meant to be.
Excellent. That's a great illustration. I want to get to some of the questions here that we're getting in from Facebook. Tom Tonkin asks, self-awareness is a great strength for leaders. When is it a weakness, though, and can we rectify it? Great question, Tom. What do you think, Lolly?
So self-awareness is the greatest thing that we can have. The only thing where I can think of where self-awareness gets in our way is if we overthink things. If we get stuck in thinking and rethinking and not having action, then all that awareness doesn't bring us where we want to be. So self-awareness is great, but what do you do with the self-awareness is even better.
That's really good. When I first started in public speaking, I thought entirely about me. And I find a lot of speakers do the same thing. I'm thinking, how am I going to come across? Will they like me? Will I be smart? Will I be funny? Will I get invited back? Will they refer me? It's all about me. And as a result of that, whenever I would step on stage, I would be so deathly nervous. And it really worked against my confidence because I'm thinking about what are they going to think about me? So I didn't have any confidence. The shift that happened in my thinking, which sounds like a little bit about what you're talking about, is that I started thinking, wait a second, what do these people need? What challenges are they facing? What are their aspirations? What are their goals? How could I be helpful? And once I started focusing on the audience, first of all, I couldn't wait to get on stage, and I knew I had something that would be helpful. So it was a total shift, but that's where, for me at least, self-awareness became a weakness because it became self-consciousness.
So actually, you just spoke to one of my archetypes. One of my archetypes is the knight. The knight always says, how can I serve you? I'll get on stage, and this is all about you. But the leadership gap is the mercenary who's self-serving, who says, am I the best speaker? Nothing against you, Michael, but it's a leader that says, what about me? How do I come across? What can I do? Everything is about me, me, me. And the fact is that when we show up and we serve others, then what happens is that we become something else. We stand in our greatness. We're in our flow. When we're so concentrating about me, 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 we end up nervous. We end up with anxiety. We end up with stress. So that's actually one of my archetypes in the book.
That's very good. Okay, by the way, guys, if you're finding this helpful, I want to encourage you to share this by clicking the share button right below the video. That will be helpful. I'm sure there's some people that you think would benefit from our discussion tonight. Okay, another question from Facebook. Brian, and I hope I don't butcher this last name, Honigman asked, what has creating the leadership framework taught you about your own leadership gaps? Lolly?
What a great question. I think I know Brian. So welcome to listening to this podcast with Michael. So the thing is, what the leadership gap and the rethink model has taught me is, when we talked about the rebel and the imposter, when
right.
You are dealing at a very high level with CEOs all the time and very powerful men and women, sometimes you can feel a little bit inadequate. Like, why am I coaching them? Why am I, talking to them? That's a little bit of the imposter syndrome within me. And what this system has taught me a long time ago is that at any given moment, I have a choice. I have a choice to be the rebel who's confident and rely on my competence, or I can show up as a leadership gap and feel like an imposter and have self-doubt. The choice is mine. Who do I want to be? And the thing is, it gives me freedom. It gives me a discipline, this system, to choose at every moment.
Excellent. Okay, here's another one. We're getting a lot of questions. This one from YouTube. A Beautiful Horizon asks, how do you go about asking for feedback? I love this. To make sure that you don't have a strength or a weakness that is obvious to everyone but you.
So what a great question. One of the stories in the book actually talks about a leader that he had no clue that he was leading from his gap. And I talk about in the book, what you don't own owns you. And the way to get feedback is to first start with family, to safe haven, right? Ask your family, is there anything that's getting in the way of me being the best version that I can be? And if they're honest, they'll tell you. And then you could ask your colleagues, and then you could go further out of the inner circle. But first start on the inner circle, where if you get feedback, you're not hurt or you don't feel overwhelmed. And then widen the circle and widen the circle and keep working on yourself, because guess what? We're always a work in progress. We never get it always right, but we always have a choice to choose what is great.
Yeah, it's really good. I've practiced that through the years myself, but I've noticed that if I get slightly defensive or try explaining away something that somebody's pointing out, like, oh, you don't understand, there's another part of this, that when you shut down people like that, especially people that work for you, it really inhibits you getting that honest feedback. And now I like to think, and I'd love to get your response to this, I like to think about how can I make this environment safe for dissent so that someone can share whatever's on their mind, no matter how critical it may be, and I can benefit from it. Because those criticisms don't go away. They just go underground if I don't create a safe environment. So do you have any tips for creating a safe environment so that you get that honest feedback?
Absolutely. Read chapter 7 in the book, but also what I think is very important, Michael, what you're asking is, I would love for you to have certain sayings. Like I have Lollyisms. What is if we come up with Michaelisms that you start a meeting with and say, I might know the answer, or you might think I know the answer, but I really want to hear from you. I would love for you to give your team permission to talk to you honestly. And actually, you can tell them to be one of the archetypes. You could say, why don't we need truth tellers? We need heroes here today. We need people to speak with candor. We need people to not be fearful. Using this system gives you a shortcut to ask for certain archetypes and virtues in a meeting that you could ask for, and people can show up. And the truth is, I think the best leaders spend more time listening than they do talking. If we can listen, we can learn. And I think that's the best way to work with the team. So bring up an archetype, but listen to learn.
Well said. Excellent. Okay, another question from Facebook. Donald Newman asks, in leading others, how important is it to lead people differently based upon their own wiring?
What a great question.
It is.
So think about it this way. I don't know if he's a dad and if he has children, but we never want to treat all our children the same or tell our children, why aren't you like him, or why aren't you like her, right? We never want to do that. The best leaders recognize the talents and the gift and the uniqueness of the person that they're talking to in that given moment. And if you can be present with someone and celebrate them for who they are, you will have someone who's loyal, dedicated, and will stand by you. You'll want that person in your foxhole. So recognize them for who they are and don't compare one to another.
Love that. Perfect. Okay, one more question, then I'm going to get back to my questions. Luria Petrucci asked, do you have a mantra or a pattern for getting yourself to think, quote, who do I want to be, end quote?
And there it was. Didn't she come up with the great mantra? Who do I want to be? I usually ask myself, who do I want to be in this given moment? Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. That is a great question to ask. Okay, so when did you first realize that the shadow side of a leader's strength is often their undoing? Was this something you witnessed in your coaching clients or something you saw in your own life, or where did that come from?
What a great question. And by the way, Michael, you have a very smart audience. Those questions were brilliant and so on point. So for everybody writing in about those questions, I just want to say kudos to you. Very smart, very, very smart. So going back to this question, which is a brilliant question, where did this all come from? When I first started to coach, I was coaching with individuals that were very successful. But then they would always lower their voice and say, Lolly, I can trust you, but I need to tell you something. And they were always saying the same thing. It didn't matter if they were a man. It didn't matter if they were a woman. It didn't matter if I was in Europe. It didn't matter if I was in the United States. It just didn't matter. I kept hearing the same things over again. The imposter syndrome, the deceiver, I kept hearing the mercenary. I kept hearing all these things. And I kept saying to myself, if it's happening to 100, it must be happening to 200. And so I started to take notes and I started to synchronize the system. And then it just revealed itself. And when I started to talk to my clients about this, is this true for you? They said, yes. How do you know me? And I kept asking my clients, do you have this? They said, yes, this is within me too. And before you knew it, the system was created and people were really resonating with it because the system came from my clients. It didn't come from me.
So there's a real sense in which you didn't create this system, you discovered it, which I love.
It almost like it was an unfolding and a revealing of that this was happening to everybody around the world. And I kind of just synchronized it into a simple system that people can understand.
Makes sense. So as you coach executives, what's the most common misconception you encounter about the gaps in their leadership?
right? So everybody thinks if they are as successful as they are, they need to know all the answers. I can't, I mean, even today, I think I've said to a nauseum today to a client, stop thinking you have to have all the answers. It is okay to ask questions or even to admit you don't know. Most of my clients think they always have to be the best at everything and know everything. And that's a big misconception with the title and position of leader.
Yeah, that's good. I can certainly see that. Anything else? Any other
Absolutely.
misconceptions?
Yes. Um, when we talk about leadership, most of literature and leadership is like great leaders need to do this and great leaders need to do that. And the reason why this book is so important, the leadership gap is so important, is because I celebrate the whole person. Because we do have strengths, but we do have weaknesses. And I never look at weaknesses as a bad thing. I look at it as if you have a weakness, let's learn to leverage it so we can be a whole person. Use your strengths, but also use your weaknesses. So you could be everything that you are. Instead of just owning parts of yourself, own all of yourself.
Do you think that for leaders to share their weaknesses, their own self-awareness about their own weaknesses, is a good thing if they share those with the team, just to acknowledge that they have these weaknesses? Or do you think that maybe hurts people's confidence in their leadership?
What a great question, because I get asked that a lot. And in the book opens up with a story about he's actually a famous person, but I can't tell who he is. I had to change his name. That he had a big weakness. But what he was doing was he was leading from his strengths, or so he thought. But the truth was that his weakness that he was trying to hide, everybody saw it. Everybody knew it. The only person that didn't know it was himself. He didn't realize it because he thought he was hiding it so well. The truth is, everybody saw it and they couldn't stand it. They didn't know what was wrong with him. They felt alienated. They felt that he was, always power hungry. They felt that he was not listening to them. And when I asked him to share his story, to come clean and tell them what he was struggling with, all of a sudden, when he decided it's okay to tell the story, his leadership team, his company, his revenue, everything changed. His leadership team understood him in a way they never understood him. His company found him to be vulnerable but strong. And revenue increased because everybody wanted to stand by this man because they saw him more as a human being than as a person that was just leading them. He brought out his humanness and his humanity, and all of a sudden they said, I want to stand by you. So revenue increased, engagement increased. It was a game changer.
That's a great story, too. I think I probably learned that first with my own children. I think a lot of parents think that if they admit their weaknesses or their mistakes, that the kids won't respect them anymore. But I've raised 5 daughters now, that it's exact opposite. They know it. And when you admit it, then suddenly you're on the same page. And like you said, they see your humanity. Their heart naturally is drawn to you. And I would never use that as a way to manipulate people, but I think it's just true that when we're ourselves, we're never more attractive. When we're trying to pretend to be somebody else, not so much. So, okay, we got some more questions. Are you game for a few more?
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, and guys, I just want to encourage you, if you're finding this helpful, please share this. Whether you're watching Facebook, YouTube, or Periscope, we're broadcasting simultaneously on all three. I'd love for you to share this with people. Okay, this is Facebook. Gerhard Paul Berger asks, is it helpful for a leader to accept being wrong? And I would just add to that, Lolly, before you answer, and in what's the proper way to do that? Like if you know you made a decision or whatever, and it was wrong, how do you admit that?
What a great question. And I would go back to my archetypes, and that is the truth teller. Because this is what I have found. When a leader withholds information or they don't admit that they've made a mistake, they lead from the leadership gap of coming across a deceiver who causes suspicion. Because people know that the leader has messed up. People know that something isn't right. And when people feel that something isn't right, people become very paranoid and they start to make up, stories about what's really happening. And what I have found is that usually the stories are much worse than reality, and people start to gossip, and people start to to feel paranoid, and it creates suspicion. And so I always tell my leaders, anybody that I've ever coached, you have bad news, tell them. You've made a mistake, tell them. Just always keep the communications open and speak from your heart and tell them the truth. They need to know because you're in this together.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Guys, again, the book is called The Leadership Gap, and I want to encourage you to order this, pre-order it on Amazon. That'll help Lolly as she seeks to get on the New York Times list, and I know how important that is as an author myself, but you can go to that link that we just threw up, which was michaelhyatt.com/leadership-gap, and that is an affiliate link, but that'll get you right there. Okay, a couple more questions. Here's one from Nancy Cullen, also on Facebook. She said, is it really true that you read a book a day? How do you do this? I do well at 3 a month.
Nancy, yes, I do read a book a day. I read between the hours of 4:30 and 6:30. That is my discipline.
That's amazing. You're one of 2 people that I know, actually 3 now, that reads a book a day. Amazing. My hat's off to you. Vicky Lashenko asked, Lolly, what are some common gaps in women leaders that are also mothers?
So, that's a great question. And I have to be very honest. This leadership gap, my book, is that it's not about gender. Self-doubt is about male and female. Being a mercenary, about self-serving, is female and male. And the thing is, the biggest mistake that people feel is that I am different. As a leader, I am different. I've been with leaders for the past 3 decades, very powerful men and very powerful women. The women that want to act like men never succeed. The women who stay true to be women are very successful leaders. Let the men be men and let the women be women. And together, I think we could make a great world and a great company and a great team.
I've seen the same thing in my own leadership, that we have differences, obviously. And when we are who we are in our gender and express that, it's wonderful. I love the diversity of that. Okay, I want to ask you a personal question. What does leveraging your gaps look like for you? In other words, how do you apply this framework, this concept in your own life and work?
What a great question. And I'm happy that you asked that, because I practice this every single day. There are 2 things that I suffer from profusely. Number 1 is being a perfectionist. And I learned a long time ago that if I was looking for perfect, it wouldn't exist. And I found myself in the inventor when I learned that an inventor's craft is all about excellence. When I could come from integrity and excellence and quality, then I give up perfection. I give up trying to be perfect, because perfect isn't real. But excellence, I can always reach. So I can't tell you how many times during the day do I ask myself, Lolly, what is this excellent? Is this the highest quality? Is this the highest standard that you can do? And if the answer is yes, I have to let it go. Because much like you, Michael, I can hold on to something and wait for it to be perfect, but perfect never arrives, right? It never comes. And then this other part about me I have is I do suffer from the imposter syndrome, but science says for highly successful individuals, 99.1% of them suffer from the imposter syndrome. So I'm in good company. And the way that I work on the imposter syndrome within myself is I created a ritual for myself over 2 decades ago. And you know how I read a book in the morning? After I read a book in the morning, I have a discipline of gratitude. What am I grateful for? But at night, I have a very specific ritual, and it has 2 parts to it. The first part is I ask myself, Lolly, what did you do great today? How did you serve someone today? How did you make an impact or a difference today? And I really spend some time thinking about what I did that was well, that was good, that was competent, and that was capable. Because most of us spend a lot of time thinking about how we messed up. how we're not good enough, how we're not deserving enough or worthy enough. And so I want to keep a repertoire of things that I'm good at and things that I did well. I think it's very important to even out those messages of negative with positive. And the second part of it really feeds to the imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome is all about comparing ourselves to others. Look at Michael, look what he's doing. Look at Ron, look what he's doing. Look at Nancy, look what she's doing. And when you are so busy comparing yourself to others, you don't grow your own greatness. You don't develop your own greatness. So my ritual goes like this. I ask myself, Lolly, what did you do today that was better than yesterday? And what can you do tomorrow that's even greater than today? And so what I'm doing, Michael, is I'm not comparing myself to others. I'm only comparing myself to myself. I'm busy working on myself and being a work in progress. So it really helps me with the imposter syndrome and having self-doubt, because I list all my competence and my capabilities, and I don't compare myself to others.
I love that. I try to start the day with gratitude and end with gratitude, because at the end of the day, you have a choice. Probably some bad things happen, probably some things that were kind of in between, and probably some really good things. And, I know people that focus on the negative things, but that's a choice. And I just choose, my wife and I both do this at the end of the day, is just list our 3 wins for the day. And sometimes I got maybe 1.5, and I have to dig deep to find another one. But it's a great way to end the day so that you end it with more confidence than when you started, and it really sets you up for the next day, I found. Okay, Vicki had a follow-up question, and I think this is a great one. And this is probably the last question we're going to be able to do. But she said, I'm curious what Lolly's typical day looks like. Is that okay to ask? Absolutely. So we know you get up early and you start reading. So where does it go from there?
So I coach around the world. So sometimes I have to start coaching on Skype at 6:30 in the morning. I spend most of my day in service of others. And then at night is how I grow my own business. I grow my own brand. But during the day, it's all about really helping the people that I work with who have hired me. I spend my time letting them know that greatness lies within them. And after those hours, I spend with my family and my business.
Fantastic. So do you have any final thoughts as we kind of bring this to a close that you'd like to share with the audience, in addition to buy the book?
Absolutely. So the book is called What Gets Between You and Your Greatness, right? The Leadership Gap. And most people that have been listening today to this conversation, and Michael has been asking brilliant questions, and everybody has been asking very smart questions, you might be thinking, you know what? She's not talking about me because she's talking about greatness. And I wouldn't be here today if I didn't believe this. I truly believe that greatness lies within everyone. But as Michael said, it's a choice. We have to choose it. So I want everybody to know that you choose it right now, because your destiny is greatness.
Awesome. Lolly, thank you so much for joining us. And guys, thanks for joining us as well. And if you haven't done so already, please pick up a copy of Lolly's new book, The Leadership Gap, What Gets Between You and Your Greatness. You can pre-order it on Amazon right now. There's the link for it. And yes, that is an affiliate link, but hopefully it'll help you get to the right page more quickly. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Michael Hyatt Show. We're going to be taking next week off for Memorial Day, but I look forward to talking with you the following week, 7 o'clock Central Daylight Time, and I'm going to be interviewing Ramsey personality and certified business coach Christy Wright about how business people, and especially women in business, can make money doing what they love. I hope you'll join us. Thanks.